we must all ask ourselves, as Africans, as Pan Africanists, as descendants of Africa, who really owes who in this debt? And this is actually something, this phenomenon is actually detailed by the economists Leon Ndikumana and James Boyce in their book. And the book is entitled Africa's Odious Debt: How Foreign Loans and Capital Flight Bled a Continent. And I urge you guys to go research for yourselves and really look at who owes who. Because according to them, between 1970 and 2008, about $735 billion dollars, or $944 billion dollars with interest, was siphoned out of Africa, which largely surpasses the combined debt of these 33 countries that rested at $177 billion dollars in 2008. End of quote. So basically, they're taking more out of Africa than they put in foreign aid. And if these Western entities really want to help Africa, should they just not eliminate the debt once and for all with the interest and everything? What do you guys think?
I think the debt is a smaller part of the conversation. I think the bigger conversation is who owes who and how do we get our money back. Because even if they do cancel the debt, there will be an initiation of some type of debtedness that is then enabled in within the African context. And so I think the bigger issue right now is we need to think about how do we change the dynamics of cash flow and capital flow between Africa and European countries, because that's what makes or breaks the relationship at this point in time, or at least our progress as a continent. Because if we don't address fundamentally how we benefit from that relationship or what that relationship gives to us, we cannot in any way, shape, or form begin to think about a clean slate or an emancipation from, debt, right? Because even the very nature of our institutions is predicated on exploiting and running off of debt in many ways. So running off of borrowing rather than creating systemic ownership locally, right? Like the idea of privatization to me should be a non-starter. We should think about nationalizing natural resources, because that then creates accountability, and that then puts the onus of the relationship on Africans to decide what can be taken out, how it's taken out, how the profits are shared, and how then that finances development. So we need to fundamentally, I think, realign our institutions, because I think even erasing debt will not free us. I think what frees us is being able to repurpose the relationships and renegotiate, what we believe we are entitled to as Africans and descendants of Africa.
I think that it's really interesting point too, and to put in a good context too, is that the way we talk about debt, it's like we need to make sure that the average person understand what we're saying as date. And one of the way is that there's a lack of transparency, not just from the government, like Biko says that they just the government, who are the people who are at the head of the states or who in the government, they know, and they take all this money sometimes through different chains, but it's not addressed. But if the people understand what does it mean, Ghana receiving 50 billion from the China government, of the IMF, or the United States, or any foundation out there, what does that really mean to us, or to the future generation? And this is why I think it's very important to raise this question. And I think that one of the clear path is that when the government borrows money, it has to pay interest on that loan, right? So that interest, in case of Djibouti, the interest is way higher than what they can actually come about, the economy itself. You see what I'm saying? When you have such lack of transparency, so that everyone at the table knows, okay, this is how much money you're gonna be paying back on this loan. It's a lack of mistrusting in a government, and that brings the equation of social accountability. Where we have to hold those in power accountable to these loans. And also, the another thing that should be taking place is that the government need to engage its local population in determining, do we really need to issue a bond for this project? For example, do we really need to build this terminal in Djibouti? Like at what point, as Djiboutian people from Djibouti, uh, do we need this port? Because this port is being really used as a U.S. strategy point. This is a France interest. This is a Chinese interest, and they're all fighting in Djibouti, not necessarily for for the people of Djibouti interest, but for their own strategies. So when you come in and you build a $2 billion port, right? That is gonna benefit maybe few people in the government, not the local people. And now you're asking, okay, we gave you 2 billion, and now you need to pay more than your budget, your annual budget in interest to these foreign entities or governments. It really raises this a lack of accountability and a lack of social accountability, and that's the next crisis we're gonna have. And we have seen this. When you cannot meet your payment to the government, what happened is it become, you either subject to IMF regulation, where they give you a bailout loan and they tell you what to do. They tell your people what to do, just like what happened in Greece, or what happened to Sri Lanka when the China government built a port there, and Sri Lanka couldn't afford to pay the 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 interest on the loan, which Sri Lanka didn't really need that port. But now the port is owned by the Chinese government on a 99 years lease agreement. But you see, this is really not benefiting African people. Angola people still live, according to the Oxford Poverty and Human Development, they say the poverty in Angola is at 48%. Like, and you have all this massive loan. So one can ask, oh, what happened to this loan, and what's the future for the people holds? These are critical questions. Oh, in Tanzania, we have the China government helping to build a library at the University of Dar es Salaam, I believe for 40 something million dollar. That's a good investment. It's a public, it's a library, benefits the interest of the people. But is this really the first immediate problem? And what's gonna happen if we don't know the term or the loan? What happened, the Tanzanian people can't afford to pay the interest on this loan? What's gonna happen to, is China coming in and take the asset like they're doing in other countries? What asset is the Chinese government interested in? So that's pretty much my question and my concern.
Yeah, and I think these should be questions and concerns for everybody in the African continent and away. And this actually brings us to our final concluding arguments. And I would like to highlight a speech that was made in Addis Ababa in 1987 by Thomas Sankara, when he urged his fellow leaders to create a united front against debt. He said, and I quote, "If we refuse to pay, the funders will not die. But if we agree to pay, we are the ones that will die." End of quote. Biko, Bo, and Chance, please give us your last thoughts about this. What is it that we can do collectively or individually and collectively as a society to move forward from this point?
Absolutely. Real quickly, I want to say that individually, one of the things we need to do, especially for students and those who are concerned about the future of the African continent, is to educate ourselves about the reality of this foreign aid situation that we're into. I want to bring people to the attention of the report that was produced, like on illicit financial flows, by Thabo Mbeki. But also, there is a lot of different resources out there, and basically understand how this system function is very important. Collectively as a society, I think the African continent needs to seriously look into alternative sources of financing African continent. And this is very critical. Like right now, as we speak, the way we're going, and this is like a journey we've been to like for 50 years right now. It's not working. They are parroting a story which is like really not true, and this is like, of course, like by the World Bank, IMF, they're behind this. And the idea is like Africa is growing, but then when you look at the statistics, and they've been saying this thing for a long time. Yes, some economies are growing, by 3%, by 5%, by 7%, and that's well and good. But if you look at collectively, the African continent hasn't been doing better. In fact, the poverty level has increased. Dambisa Moyo, in her book Dead Aid, really does well in highlighting the dynamics of this aid, although she doesn't like provide what I think is a very good alternative. Another thing, and this is the last, is we need to start moving towards working together as the African continent. And what that means is we need to create systems of trust between one another. And that is not going to happen if we still caught up in the colonial mentality and framework that was set. The states that we have within the African continents were all created 1984, 1984, 85, when Europeans sat at the table, like not a single African there, and like created all these states. And the idea was, let's make it impossible, divide and conquer, make it impossible for this African continent, these African people to work together. We need to break that. We need to break that kind of mentality, and we need to move forward towards creating systems of trust within the African continent. One of the things we can do, for instance, is take all our minerals, or like all these minerals that are very important, like talking about diamond, or like all these the things that you mentioned, Linda, and maybe peg our currency to those so that we have power right there. So that means if you want to get these minerals, which I'm sure the West needs, they're gonna have to go through us, and so they have to bargain with us. We give them what we have, they give us what they have. And plus, another thing is that we need we need reparations. We need reparations for all these policies that were like being. Africa is a testing ground for these multinational corporations, but also the policies of the IMF and the World Bank. And we can move forward like this. We are not like objects. We are not objects of research and testing. These are people who needs a very good life. And what we have seen is that like it's not been working well for especially the majority of the Africans who live on a continent that is rich but remain poor.
Thank you very much, Biko. Bo, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are this. I think Pico touched on a lot of essential things around, collective action on the African continent. But I think far more important, or at least additionally to that end, is that Africa needs to understand that its value is not only in its resources, but its people, right? That if we cannot provide the capacity for our people to be productive, then we inherently fail in planning for the future. And what we need to do going forward is to interrogate this idea of someone who's not living in our space telling us what is best for us. Africa's priorities for development have never been and will never be the same as the priorities for European development. We have an agenda that we have to meet, and ultimately, if we don't address that agenda, we fail. And so going forward, we need to sit down and look at what our developmental priorities are going forward and how best to achieve those. And if it means that we only collectively organize within the periphery of our own space and our own interests, that is what we do, and build our growth in ways that are sustainable and address our needs before our luxuries. And I think that the problem is that we are too caught up on trying to live luxuriously before we address the fundamental needs of Africa as a whole.
Thanks you very much, Bo. Chance, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Few thing I would like to say is that first the meeting I was talking about was in 2018, and that's when the meeting take place in China.
The meeting with the African heads of states, yes.
So my I think I have to take away from this is definitely like a podcast like this really helps reach out to the African in the continent and the African in diaspora to just be aware of what's coming. China is growing. It's the new. It's definitely gonna be a new superpower coming to Africa. It's been in Africa, but we didn't really have the resources to say, okay, so why do we have this such presence of Chinese government activity in Africa and where this is going, like what we did have with the Belgian, say why do we have the Belgian in the Congo and where this is going, So I think now we have a clear history where we can look back and see, okay, we see the trend and where the world is moving. So I would really like to see the unity of Africans, the unity of African states, the unity of African people, so that as a collective voice, Djibouti is not subjugated to the Chinese superpower. The Djibouti people, uh, they have a say in the contract that they are negotiating either with the IMF, with the United States, with China, with any person from outside, coming to the continent, where Zambia people can be able to negotiate a better deal for the for the government. That increase uh, transparency and responsible lending. That's what we definitely need. We do need lending, and we should promote. My second thought is promoting aids that transform Africa. So, and what that mean is that instead of yes, we do need a highway that goes from Ethiopia to Zambia, but maybe that could be not the first priority. Maybe we should negotiate to see a car manufacturing in Tanzania instead of a library. Maybe that will promote the economic well-being of a majority of Africans. If this car plant is built there, is run by African employing Africans, that's a lending that transforms Africa. I think those are like my main point, and I think that it's gonna be a bumpy road ahead. But we're still optimistic. I think we have great leadership in Africa compared to yesterday, and we see that we have a greater path, and this is all coming because african Africa is the next continent that it has like a labor force, a young labor force that is growing. So we will see a lot of competing forces, especially Western and Asian and everyone fighting for that workforce. So we just have to be mindful of that.
Thank you very much for your final thoughts, Chance, Bo, and Biko. This issue of disparity it's a problem that surpasses continents and races, and a combat that we must lead. It's something that we must absolutely be able to change because this struggle is very strategic, it's very technical, and it's a struggle about convictions and a struggle to know how to resist against choosing what is easy and against what will cause divisions. We all know that they cannot divide Africa, they cannot divide us unless we are willing to be bought. So, those of you in the diaspora, whatever you do, whoever you are considered as leaders in your families first and foremost. Therefore, you must work to help improve our mentalities and realize that it is not these foreign aid companies and foreign countries that are in charge of deciding not the next leader back home as much as they may try, nor is it up to them to decide when a family's next meal is going to be. It should be up to us to empower our people so that they make the right decisions for themselves and for the nation as a whole. My name is Linda Foinding, and I am an Afro optimist. Thank you very much.